Starting strong and quitting early doesn't mean you lack discipline. It means your brain is wired for excitement, not endurance. If this keeps happening to you, stay with me. Here's what's really happening in your brain. You're great at beginnings. You feel the spark. You make the plan. You buy the notebook, download the app, set the alarm. For a few days, maybe even a few weeks, you're on fire. You show up early. You stay consistent. You imagine the future version of yourself. Then something shifts. The excitement fades. The routine feels heavy. Progress becomes invisible. You miss one day, then two, then it quietly ends. And you tell yourself, I'll start again next week. I just lost motivation. I'm bad at sticking to things. You don't quit because you don't care. You quit because the feeling that carried you is gone. And without that feeling, everything feels harder than it should. Your brain runs on two systems. One is driven by novelty and reward. The other is driven by effort and patience. When you start something new, your brain releases dopamine. Dopamine doesn't mean happiness. It means anticipation. It makes you feel energized, hopeful, capable. But dopamine isn't built to last. Once the activity becomes familiar, that chemical rush fades. Now your brain has to rely on something else: structure, patience, repetition. And for many people, that system was never trained. So when the excitement disappears, your brain interprets it as, this isn't working, this isn't for me, I've lost motivation. But what actually happened is simple. You reach the part where growth becomes quiet. This video is about why that drop happens and what it really means. You're going to understand why motivation always fades, why your brain confuses boredom with failure, and what separates people who continue from people who restart. By the end, you won't feel ashamed for quitting. You'll understand why it happened. And what changes everything? Here's the truth most people never hear. People who quit early aren't weak. They're sensitive to inner states. They notice when energy shifts, when passion fades, when something feels off. But instead of being taught how to move through discomfort, they learn to move away from it. So when effort replaces excitement, their mind says, this isn't aligned. This doesn't feel right anymore. Maybe this isn't my path. What feels like intuition is often just discomfort. And because no one taught them that growth feels dull before it feels rewarding, they interpret boredom as a sign to stop. Not because they can't endure, because they were never shown how. Over time, this pattern reshapes how you see yourself. You begin to doubt your reliability. You hesitate to start anything new. You stop trusting your own plans. You might say, I'm inconsistent. I never finish what I start. I always mess it up. And slowly, your identity changes, not because you lack ability, but because you've taught your brain that endings are optional. That discomfort means stop. That effort means something is wrong. So your potential stays in the starting line, not because you're incapable, because your mind learned to retreat at the first sign of resistance. This isn't about forcing yourself harder. It's about changing what your brain thinks progress feels like. You weren't built to fail. You were built to respond to feelings. And no one taught you that growth often feels quiet, repetitive, underwhelming, slow, not inspiring, not dramatic, just ordinary. Starting strong is a gift. Quitting early is a misunderstanding. It's your brain saying, I thought this would feel better by now. But most meaningful change feels worse before it feels better. Not because it's wrong, because it's real. Instead of asking, do I still feel motivated? Ask, can I continue even when this feels boring? And instead of measuring progress by emotion, measure it by presence. Did I show up? That's it. Not perfectly, not passionately, just honestly. The people who finish aren't more inspired. They're more familiar with discomfort. They stop treating the absence of excitement as a sign to stop. They learn to walk when the feeling disappears. Starting strong isn't your problem. Quitting early isn't your identity. It's a pattern your brain learned, and patterns can change, not through pressure, through understanding. So the real question isn't, why do I always quit? It's, what happens inside me when the excitement ends? If this spoke to something personal, Subscribe to True Self Psychology. We explore the thoughts and patterns people rarely talk about so you can understand yourself more deeply. You don't need more motivation. You need a new relationship with discomfort.